Okay, predict 104 degrees for high or whatever, and people want their air conditioner stored.
Yeah, it's funny. That's that's odd, isn't it?
Yeah,
Preston's trying to get his feather.
Okay.
well, that's true.
You're live.
Okay, we're live and it is
You're good.
nearly 6:00. Okay, so welcome everyone. We will go ahead and get this meeting started. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Special board meeting on Monday, June 26th. First item is to approve the agenda. Take a motion to approve.
I move to approve the agenda.
Second.
A motion and second to approve. All those in favor? Motion carries 6-0. Consent agenda. So just an item to consider financial statements and reports, year-end bill list. Questions?
I assume the Riddell stuff's like football.
Home reconditioning mostly, and then, purchases.
And one.
Purchases.
Cool.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion and second to approve the consent agenda. Any questions? All those in favor? Motion carried 6-0. So then next item is the discussion and business items. First of all, should probably welcome our guests in the audience. Thanks for being here. Want to first start with property and casualty insurance. So Mr. Nelson and Andrea have been working hard on this and give them the opportunity to discuss it.
Yeah, thank you. Kind of exciting stuff when we have to talk insurance, but we do have our insurance representative here tonight, and I don't know, just kind of a little background. We have been kind of out in the marketplace seeing what is available for us. And in the school district world in the state of Kansas, there's two main carriers, EMC, who's our previous provider, and then the pool, who has 93,
I think was last count.
93 school districts. And so outside of that, there really is not any other options for school districts to consider. We did, as you guys know from our last meeting, work a little bit with a broker from IMA to go out to the national marketplace and see what they could find as viable options. And they had some early indications from the marketplace. And we got a lot of this late last week, right? As we hit our board meeting deadline, and their market indication for what they would be able to offer us would be a 2 to 3% deductible of our assessed value or property values. And so we'd be looking at like a 1.6 or $1.7 million minimum deductible. And then we'd have to go to the marketplace and buy a deductible buy down with that option. And then that would have been likely just for the property side. And then they would have had to go out to a separate vendors for your professional, your vehicle, cyber. And so we would have had multiple policies of different people. And obviously at that kind of price tag, that's not something that, we're not a private business world, and we don't have 1.6 million sitting around to cover a deductible. And so we didn't feel that was a viable option. We did, all the information's in your packet, and our coverages remain very equitable to what we had with EMC, even some increased coverage options, especially in your cyber and professional. You can see all those values, and hopefully you had a little bit of time to look at that. And so we are recommending that we go with the pool. And I don't know if we want to take a few minutes and understand what the structure of the pool looks like, but would that be helpful for you guys to kind of understand the basis of the structure of the pool? We'll let our.
So this is Mark.
Do you have the Tetris law?
Certainly.
Come on, Mark, you can come on up and sit the seat right here. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Kerma started in 2015. Yeah, Kerma started in 2015, and if you think about it, the whole pooling concept is to find the districts that are pretty good about managing the business. We can't do much or anything about the hail and wind, but let's find the districts that can manage their business affairs appropriately, and then as a group, buy a great big deductible. So we're up to 93. I don't think the pool will ever probably go north of 200 districts. I think they're gonna stay focused on the districts that can manage their business affairs appropriately, and then hope we can all survive the weather. If. That's fine.
In the agenda, there's a bunch of blocks that talk about structure of how the.
You guys all have that on your computer. Perfect. So they, I think they're all looking at it.
Looking at that, okay. So that's the program structure of the pool. Every district has a maintenance deductible, and those different vertical columns are different coverages, right? So we'll have a property deductible specific for us in light blue. When I said collectively, we buy a big deductible, we're buying a deductible in the army green color. So for property insurance, the pool is going to be responsible for the first $400,000 of any single claim. So the district will pay our individual property deductible. The pool will come in and pay another $400,000, and then we buy insurance from the marketplace in those boxes as it goes up. There are something like 80 different property insurance companies participating in our property placement, all the way up to 50 million, up to 350 million in the top layer. And that's how we do each column of coverage, from property to general liability and automobile liabilities in the second block, school leaders, legal liability, crime. And they all come out of the Army Green box over there, and our loss fund right now is $6.2 million. The pool by state statute is accessible. The pool by mechanics is not accessible, because we're buying that blue box above the Army Green box of $2 million. If our loss fund were ever off, we'd have another $2 million to come down. So the likelihood of an assessment when the loss fund is made up of each district's worst year out of 5, the likelihood of us being assessable is minuscule. Any questions? That's a lot of blocks on there, and kind of a confusing concept, but the marketplace is dicey at best. Even my accounts that are claim free are seeing 30 to 50% increases all over. So happy that we got the numbers that we did, and think they're all pretty good.
So explain, it wasn't super clear to me anyway, the deductible buy down piece. And where that is, I mean, it's this Lloyd's of London, correct?
Yes,
And is that the 38,000?
it's $38,000 to buy our deductible for wind and hail down from 250 to 25.
Okay, so that does get us to the 25.
Yes.
Great.
So if we have a loss at $150,000.
Yep.
Permanent's policy won't kick in until 250,000, but we would have an insurance policy for just wind and hail that would capture everything from 25,000 up to 250.
Yep.
It basically just covers that. How much risk do you want to take? If we, and if you choose to think, no, we don't want to spend, the 38,600, okay. Any loss that we have that is under $250,000, we will be paying out of pocket for.
But we're not doing the deductible write down on the water damage, right?
Correct.
We decided to just do wind and hail,
Yes,
and that's what that 38 grand.
correct.
Okay, got it.
So if we were to have another incident like what happened at the middle school, we would have $100,000 deductible for something like that. The likelihood of that happening, I mean, we're more likely to see hail and wind.
Yeah, I think we've had. Something didn't hail. every year.
Almost every year.
There's, yeah,
Some,
always
No,
something
I
at the
mean, there's
middle
just,
school.
we have enough buildings and enough weather and property.
And,
I
you know,
don't, I don't see us proceeding without the deductible buy down.
And it's not just the roofs though, like you take into one of the claims that happened at the middle school. You know, it blew the roof off the gymnasium, well then water got in and we had damage to the floor. It's still part of that. Even though that there was water damage that came out of it, the cause of the loss was wind and hail. And, you know, out of that, it just,
That
But it's
deductible
one-
buy down is only for buildings though.
no, it's per occurrence.
It would be for building income.
Per occurrence, so if we have it
Okay.
twice and you're ready to pay that twice.
Same thing if you choose not to do deductible buy down and you want to go with the 250, okay, we can cover it once at 250. But like we experienced this last April, that happened and a week later, there was a tornado going for Wakefield. Those would be two different occurrences. We would have paid out 250 and 250. And thankfully, we didn't experience that. But, and you know, 365 days is a lot of time. And we all know that the weather is pretty unpredictable. It's just how much risk do you want to take? Because, you know, $250,000, that's gonna sting. 500 is gonna hurt. 750 is, that's tough.
Any other questions for Mark, before we have them? It's one of the questions I have is like the building limit for all locations, 72 million. Like, if that hit one school, we couldn't probably replace any school for 72 million.
Well, they assess our values and they tell us what our buildings are worth. And we took a 30,
Last year,
There we
EMC took our total insurable value from 67 million up to 80 million. And they did valuation reports, and when they handed those to us, it's like, well, you don't argue. So, I mean, I would assume,
And we will have an appraisal done this year by the pool. And we'll have to accept whatever those numbers come back.
You might have heard about it, but the fire out of Atwood in Rawlins County, they had arsons and kids burnt the high school down. And it was insured for 15 million, and I think it's gonna cost 47 to replace it. So I just,
the
Look at
thing to remember is that 82 million is a blanket value that covers everything. So we would have to have a total loss at Lincoln, Garfield, middle school and the high school.
right,
And it's
That's not
not
gonna happen.
likely.
but I'm just thinking if the high school's gone, it's just 25 million, there's no way, I don't think there's any way to replace the high school for 25 million.
But we're insured to 87 because we have that blanket.
Gotcha.
They got to the 87 million based on these individual
Okay.
values. So we are protected by having that blanket
Okay,
that covers our building and our contents.
I just want to make sure that was how it was.
And there's no reason for us to spend the money to up the values now, because sometime in the next 12 months, they're gonna come in and say, here's what number you're gonna insure for, and we'll just have to take it.
And that takes into account inflation, you know, back during when EMC was fighting us last year. I mean, when you pay out claims, obviously it adjusts how much the claim expense goes out to the insurance companies. And that's kind of one of the reasons why they've gotten really hard into making sure that they're insured to value and getting all the premium, because if there is a claim and construction prices to fix this stuff is 300% more than it was 5 years ago, they have to pay that. And that's kind of where they're seeing a lot of these increases that are coming out in premiums. It's just insurance companies are still paying claims and it just costs more.
Yeah.
And so it hurts it hurts everybody. All the way down to us and how much premium that we pay in. And part of this isn't the way the Kermit structure happens is they've got the premium that goes into this, but they, based on our experience, have calculated what our portion into the loss fund is, that little part that's coming into that. And that weighs quite a bit. I think it was 167,000 is what our contribution to the loss fund is. So of that 436, they're saying, well, hey, here's how likely we think you guys are to have a claim based on your experience. So here's how much you're gonna pay into the loss fund because this is what we think the probability of you guys having a claim. We can go 3 to 5 years and not have a claim, but that's not, I mean, when you get to wind and hail, but we can't control that. And then you just decide, you know, when your scoreboard ends up across the street in somebody's tree, you know, do you want to pay for that or do you turn it into your insurance?
So that 167,000 in loss fund, if the pool has a surplus at the end of the year, then the board, and you guys will have a seat running this insurance company, will decide what they're gonna do with those funds that will be earmarked for your district. So is that a distribution in the future? Does that credit towards future premium payments? The pool has a surplus of the 7 years we're finished. I think there's a surplus in 4 of those years with the money earmarked to go back to the districts on a program basis.
Basically, at the end, if we look good at the end of some time, we could take a refund back and, you know, deposit it back into our, you know, our cash balances, or we could leave it out in the pool and not pay as much in premium. But you have to get there. You know, we have to not have as many claims. We have to look good on paper.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, any other questions?
I move to get final approval. That's supposed to be to bid combined property casualty insurance coverage with the Kansas Educational Risk Management Pool and Lloyd's of London through Iron Insurance Partners as presented.
Second.
Motion and second to approve as recommended. Any questions? All those in favor? Motion carries 6-0. Thank you. Very much. Great for work.
Thanks.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks for being here. Item B then is workers' compensation insurance. So kind of similar fashion, might not be much conversation, but
Yeah, so in the quote, both the work comp and the property cat was all in one, but we've always done this 2 board reports, so we kept them separate. We can do it differently down the road if you want to, but it's a little nicer to look at a premium that's going down instead of up. So, you know, that mod is always a year in the rear.
Factor.
And so it's dependent upon the work comp claims we have throughout the year. We did consider adding a $1,000 deductible per claim, but it was only about a $3,500 annual savings. And based on our loss runs, it just didn't really make sense at this time. In the future, if we ever had a bad year with work comp claims, we could add a $1,000 deductible per claim. We pay the first 1,000 of any work comp claim. And it could bring our mod down or our premium down a little bit. Our mod was headed in the right direction. We are anticipating it's kind of always a year in the rear. So your premium and your mods based on your performance from the year before. And so we did have a few, not a lot, but we had a handful of claims this year. And so we'll stay steady, maybe go up slightly next year based on what our performance was last year. Remember, we bid this out last year, made the switch.
I move to approve the RAS workers' compensation quotation from Iron Insurance Partners as presented.
Second.
all right, motion and second to approve as recommended. All those in favor? Motion carries 6-0. Okay, moving right along. Next item is soft closeout balances and transfers. Things to discuss, share.
Yeah, so, you know, sometimes we're creatures of habit and we just do things because we've always done them that way. And this special meeting kind of brought up something to consider in the future. And it was always kind of odd the last couple of years, Andrea and I had talked about it. We historically haven't done soft closeout transfers until the July meeting. Well, once we hit that July meeting, we've already closed our software and rolled to the next fiscal year. So if you guys ever wanted to make any changes to what we recommend, would be very difficult, if not impossible to do. And so and while this isn't, it's called soft for a reason, the final cash balances will be at the July meeting on the treasurer's statement. There's little things that will happen in between now and July 1st. And a great example was today, KDHE had originally told us we had X amount of money, and then they looked at everybody across the state and said, oh, wait, actually you have X amount. And so we had to credit that back to general fund. And once that gets credited to general fund, we had to shift it over. We won't know what our interest on idle funds for the bank will be until later in this week. And so that's a revenue that we haven't received yet that will actually have to be deposited into that's required. It goes to capital outlay, I believe is where interest goes. So those balances will shift slightly between now and our July meeting, but we just wanted to make sure that you guys know that's a little nuance of what happens at the end of the year. And maybe if you guys are interested, we consider just adding a regular meeting every year, the last Monday of June. And that way, it just feels a little, I think it's a little cleaner if we do it that way. But we don't have to decide that tonight. We can decide that tomorrow or when we do our annual meeting notice in January. And so we ended the year very well, and I'm not going to bore you and read everything, but the process, the goal, we hit the goal last year, the year before, of making sure that in all our special funds that we were to balance and we had enough cash to make payroll through till January, so that's when we get our big tax payment. And so we have to, live on what we have from July 1st until mid-January's payroll. And so we met that goal a couple of years ago, and we were able to use general fund and LOB and make those transfers back to starting balances and all those special funds. And unfortunately, with the hefty insurance increase, it did eat into our carryover that we do utilize for those unanticipated expenses. Sometimes we choose to use a little bit of those to help get a better compensation package in place. Last year, if you'll remember, we did choose to use a little bit of that anticipated carryover to give the larger classified raise. I think we gave it's 15.5% raise to classified last year. Unfortunately, this year, our recommendation would be that we don't utilize any of that anticipated carryover next year for compensation, just because we took such a large increase this year. Our recommendation would be to take what we do have, put it in the contingency reserve, and let us see how this first year of changing insurance goes, see how the deductible goes, see what increases or what insurance rates do for next year. And if we ever did throughout the year have to file a claim, we could utilize that contingency reserve money.
The pools seem a little less steep on the increases, or is it pretty much follow the market?
I've talked to a few friends that I have that have participated in the pool, and they have all, none of them, for example, some of my friends that I talked to that have one very close neighbor that has EMC, their claim free, and theirs went up 40% this year. And I did not hear of any increases like that within the pool this year. And the pool's highly dependent upon the weather in Kansas and what happens around the state too.
But maybe we can get some more consistency in that insurance area to allow us some planning for that.
100%.
Yeah.
And that's another nuance too, that we talked a lot about internally, and it just didn't fit right this year, but next year, maybe we could consider it. It gets a little tricky, but so we pay our premium for next year out of this year's money. And so then next month, we're going to sit down to budget, and we're going to have to budget for our insurance premium that's 11 months ahead.
Yeah.
And so that makes it really, really hard. Why did we do that? I don't know. Maybe we had a provider once upon a time that required a requisition or a purchase order before July 1. I really don't know, and no one in our office could recall. But that may be something that we want to consider doing down the road. And one idea could be, you're going to have to skip a year, and remember you skip a year and don't get caught behind. And so we need to process that a little bit, but that really might be in the district's best interest to shift that payment to July.
Mhm.
And then we're budgeting with real numbers, like we would be
Right.
building budgets on,
Not
What
an
is presented?
estimation.
you know,
Right.
instead of.
And this
going,
is
well, what
always
it
a
is.
June number. It's not,
It has to be because
Yeah.
it's the new
it's
July.
always, and so,
Well, and based on weather trends, we've learned, we used to bring
right, another thing.
things in May. And, like I said, we just got the stuff last week and I think long gone are the days of insurance companies releasing with more than 30 days in advance because of what could happen. Very long.
I mean, we could, another option would be, we did in your cash balances in the closeout document do reflect, we have to get general fund down to our legal max or to zero. There's $4. Why is there $4? Well, we got a special oil tax payment that we had never received before in the amount of $4. And so we didn't receipt it into the system. And so KSD said, just reflect it in your balance, carry it over to next year, and you'll spend the $3.90, I think is what it was. So that's why it's not zero, it's 4, not 0. But they do reflect the full balance of our property and casualty, including the deductible buy down, including work comp out of this year's money, and that's reflected in the closeout. We did consider, should we recommend paying a portion of this out of, contingency, carrying it over, skipping a year, paying it in July, and it just all happened so fast and so quick that we need a little bit more. We felt like we needed a little bit more time to process and think about what change in that date to the following fiscal year would do. The good news is if we have a good year and we make it through the end and we get to this time of year or a little earlier next year, we could look at some creative ways of possibly paying that in June, and then the challenge with that is, okay, we pay it in June next year. Well, then we go a whole fiscal year.
Without.
And so we just need to really process through and understand the pros and cons of doing that and the causes and effects of doing that. So, but the good news is we were able to sustain that hefty increase this year's money. The bad news is it is going to affect, I believe, the compensation package that we're providing.
Any further questions for Mr. Nelson?
I move to give final approval to authorize 2022-2023 year-end transfers.
Second.
Motion second to authorize as recommended. Any questions? All those in favor? Motion carries 6-0. Great. That takes us to our executive session portion of tonight. So we'll take a couple minutes and then we'll come back. All right, we're back. So we'll be going to executive session to discuss negotiations pursuant to negotiations exception under KOMA. The open meeting shall resume at 6:45 in this room. The executive session will include the board, superintendent, and council.
Second.
And all those in favor? Motion carries 6-0. I move to extend the current session for an additional 3 minutes. We'll return at 6:49, actually. 6:49.
Second.
All those in favor, motion carried 6-0. All right, that should bring us then to the personnel section.
I want to recuse myself from the discussions and voting for this one.
Okay, all right. Thank you for making that announcement. Any questions about any item?
Right, so it'd be out of pocket.
That's correct, yes. Any questions about any of the items on the report? If not, I move to approve the recommendations as presented.
Second.
A motion and second. Any questions? All those in favor? Motion carries 5-0. Move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor of adjourning, motion carries 6-0. Okay, thanks, everyone.